Mastering the LNAT course. My name is Atul John and this is the Law Admissions Academy. Between us, we have spent hundreds of hours tutoring students into entry into the top law schools in the UK, including LSE, UCL, Bristol and Oxford to name but a few. Today, we'd like just to explain what the LNAT is and how our Mastering the LNAT course can help you. For those of you that are not 100% sure about how the LNAT works, let me break it down for you. The LNAT consists of two sections, Section A and Section B. Section A consists of 42 multiple choice questions that you have 95 minutes to complete. Section B is equally as time pressured. You have to write an essay in the space of 40 minutes and you have a choice of 3 questions. And you'll be doing this exam at a test centre on a computer. So where do we come in? Well, Mastering the LNAT is a 3-pronged course. Firstly, we have 5 lectures on Section A, the notoriously tricky multiple choice section, and 2 lectures on Section B, the essay section. I'll be covering the essay section and my colleagues will be covering the multiple choice section. The lecture uses 2 formats to impart our information. The first takes a classroom approach, and this is how we will start each lecture. The lecturer will outline the topic and provide visual cues on the side. This takes the form of key points and tips, but also small or easy examples prior to jumping into the detailed bulk of the lecture. Then the real work gets started. The screen will be filled with text and the lecturer will give a voiceover and annotate as they go. Students will be given cues to pause the video for reading and thinking time before the lecturer goes to the logic and answers too. In addition to this, we'll have a massive question bank and discussion podcast that you can work your way through in your own time.
Thank you to Atul for that introduction. I'm Jacob Mills, and together with Harry Stallard, we lead the first 5 lectures in the series. Now, these 5 lectures focus on Section A. The first substantive lecture that you will get to see once you get to the Mastering the LNAT course is reading the text. In this lecture, Harry will take you through a few skills that you will need to have and a few ways of reading the text more effectively and more efficiently. For example, Harry will tell you that you need to actually read the words rather than skim them. And there are various justifications and reasons for this that the lecture will take you through in quite some detail. Next up is one of my lectures, the Final 2. Now, the Final 2 is a very specific skill that we've developed to help people that maybe struggle with their timing. In the LNAT, Section A, every single question has 5 possible answers. Now, usually, out of those 5 possible answers, you should be able to strike away about 3 as being incorrect. That will leave you with, well, your final 2. And out of those final 2, one of them's correct, and the other one is sort of correct, but not quite. Now, the final 2 is a method for helping you get those extra marks when you're running out of time. If you're running out of time, you can get down to the final 2 quite quickly, and you increase your odds to 50% at a guess, rather than just 20. Our third lecture is on the grand logic. Here, Harry will take you through, holistically, some large texts, and from that you will answer what we call grand logic questions. The best examples of these kind of questions include, what is the author's main view? Or would the author agree with this statement, for example? Next up is another one of my lectures called Analytical Reasoning. Now, analytical reasoning is the opposite of the grand logic. So this is where we'll be looking at some really specific questions. So, for example, the question might be, which of the following words is used positively? Then they'll provide you with 5 possible words, and 4 of them will have been used negatively, and 1 of them will have been used positively. Now, analytical reasoning isn't normally quite that easy. What you'll realistically see is 3 that are used negatively, 1 that's used in a sort of neutral way, and then 1 that's used positively. So we'll look at some tricky examples and some borderline examples as well. The final lecture in our Section A part of the series is called Understanding Nuances. Now, in this lecture, we will look at quite a few specific examples on things that we have omitted to talk about in the previous 4. We also treat this lecture as a bit of a wrap-up of Section A. So we'll look at various different things from the grand logic to the final 2 to analytical reasoning. This is where we turn to the final 2 lectures in the series. These are led by Atul and they concern Section B, our essay section. The first is called Pitfalls to Perfection. What we've done in this lecture is we've taken our tutoring experience, which is usually 1-to-1, and we've come up with a few things that pupils frequently do incorrectly. Now, these include various things from structure to time management and so on, and we'll talk you through quite a number of examples actually using real essays that students have written for us. Finally, Atul will look at argumentation. This is in a lecture that we call an academic response. Students often haven't quite developed the full ability to develop an argument through their essays. Now, Atul will look at the best ways to improve your argument, to create a nuanced argument, and to create a cohesive argument throughout your essay. And again, we'll be looking at examples, contrasting less appropriate arguments with arguments that we think would score significantly higher. That is a whistle-stop tour of our bespoke course curriculum for the Mastering the LNAT course. I hope you enjoyed, and of course, if you have any questions, you can find our email, which is team@lawsadmissionsacademy.com. Good luck.
Hello, I'm Harry, and I put up an example text entitled Flat Earthers, as well as 3 questions for you to look at. So if you'd like to have a little read through the text, you can pause the video here, and we'll come back in a few moments. Lovely. Now you'll notice that I didn't put up the answer possibilities there, and there's a good reason for that, which we'll look at in more detail when we get to the first lecture on reading the text. But anyway, the first question is this: which best summarises the author's argument? So here, we're looking for a summary of the author's overall view, their overall argument. Now what we're not looking for is a sub-point which is somehow linked or justifies the main argument, and nor are we looking for any peripheral point in the text. We're looking for the holistic, the overall argument. Taking a holistic view of the text is a skill we'll look at in full detail in the lecture on the grand logic. So the first possibility then is A. The flat earth conspiracy is clearly an illegitimate belief. Now this answer possibility is very absolute and uses the phrase clearly not. When we look at the text, the author certainly doesn't agree with the flat earthers. They say, for instance, here in the second paragraph, that they have overstepped the mark, and later, the problem with flat earthers is they mistrust evidential fact, scientific method, and repeatable results. However, we mustn't get too bogged down in the little details of the text. We need to maintain that holistic view of the argument in its entirety. So, is the main thing the author is trying to argue here is that the flat earth conspiracy is illegitimate? Well, to me, it seems that the actual argument is broader than that and covers the general topic of beliefs, evidence and conspiracies, and the flat earthers would just be an example of that. Furthermore, if we look in other places in the text, we see that at no point has the author completely rejected the idea of the flat earth conspiracy. Here in the first paragraph, the author tells us that we can learn valuable lessons from the conspiracy theory. And in the second paragraph, the author says that their mistrust is not an altogether bad thing. A is therefore not the right answer, and what I'll do is strike it through with red. Then we've got B. Flat earthers are simultaneously too trusting and mistrusting. Now this answer is certainly more promising. We mentioned on the previous answer possibility that this argument is probably based on more general principles of belief and evidence, which is what this answer revolves around. The main evidence that the flat earthers are both too trusting and too mistrusting comes at the end of the second paragraph with this phrase: "They have a complete lack of trust in humanity, but an absolute abundance of trust for the incoherent theories expounded by their clique." Again, in paragraph 3, it said, "This gives us a valuable insight into the relationship between mistrust and acceptance or acquiescence. They can clearly, in the form of a conspiracy, be present at the same time." So that's some strong evidence there for B. But we can't yet be certain if this is indeed the best summary of the argument, because we haven't looked at the other answers. So what I'll do is leave this one in yellow while we have a look at the other answers. Then we've got C. It is paramount that we do not just ignore conspiracy theories without giving them any thought. Now the author tells us that, on one hand, it is of paramount importance that we maintain our ability to scrutinise and question authority figures in our lives. And that certainly suggests that conspiracy theories shouldn't just be ignored, as it is important to scrutinise the mainstream view of the facts. However, the author also tells us that it is equally important that we sometimes accept things, even if we don't like them. And that tells us that some conspiracy theories are just not worth taking seriously. Again, the last line in this paragraph is, "The flat earthers are a paradigm example of the former gone wrong." In other words, the flat earthers are an example of where this mistrust has gone just too far. Evidently then, it is not so important as to be paramount that we take all conspiracies seriously. Sometimes you just got to accept the facts. The flat earthers, who reject evidential fact, as well as any other groups that deny provable fact, can essentially be ignored. So I'm not convinced then that C is right. We have possibility D. Challenging authority is very important, providing we do not challenge science. Now D is very similar to C in its balancing between when we should and when we shouldn't trust the mainstream. We already know that sometimes we should challenge the mainstream, but that we should not do so where it does so against demonstrable evidential fact. However, not all science is going to be fact. Sometimes it may be conjecture or theory. At no point in this text have I been left feeling persuaded that I should never question science. If the results, for example, were not obtained using a repeatable scientific method, like the author says, then the author practically invites us to question it. So D doesn't seem right at all. And last of all, we have E. That people should neither be too trusting nor too mistrusting. So E is a broad possibility for which there's quite a bit of evidence, namely this quote. On the one hand, it is of paramount importance that we maintain our ability to scrutinise and question authority figures in our lives. We've seen this one already. Now this obviously suggests that people should not be too trusting, that we should be questioning. Then it goes on. On the other, it is equally important that we sometimes accept things, even if we don't like them. And obviously that suggests that people should not be too mistrusting. Similarly, at the start of the last paragraph, we have this phrase. This gives us a valuable insight into the relationship between mistrust and acceptance or acquiescence. Given its similarity to B, which is another strong possibility, this is a good contender. So ultimately, do we go for B or E? We'll look in more detail at this technique of whittling down answers in Lecture 2, the final two. But for now, let's have a go. Possibility B says, flat earthers are simultaneously too trusting and mistrusting. E says, people should be neither too trusting nor too mistrusting. B then is really an inert statement. Would the author write this extensive piece just to give us a statement? Probably not. E, on the other hand, is a suggestion, a campaign, or something to rally for, People should be neither too trusting nor too mistrusting. It's an active argument. And on that basis, combined with all the other reasons we've looked at, E is the correct answer. Let's have a go at the next question. The author suggests that dark energy, what? Now this question deals with understanding more detailed and specific parts of the text, namely a particular phenomenon. This is something we'll have a look at properly in Lecture 4 on analytical reasoning. So possibility A, cannot exist. Let's have a look at where dark energy appears in the text to start with. Well, it's just here in the second paragraph, and I'll quote, "They thrive on the vagueness of their belief that gravity is created by the Earth accelerating upwards, propelled by dark energy." Right. Now that right is clearly an expression of scepticism, and combined with the term vagueness and ludicrous, we're evidently supposed to believe that this concept of dark energy is not really very credible. Whether it's credible in its application to gravity or in its actual, in the concept itself, we don't know yet. But where does the author say or insinuate that dark energy does not, let alone cannot, exist? Well, they simply don't. In fact, they suggest that technically this concept cannot be disproven, which means it could be proven. Therefore, we have no reason to believe that A is right, and I'll cross it off. What about B? Is not relevant to the theory of gravity. Now, I think we can say that the author certainly insinuates that this mysterious dark energy phenomenon, whether it in fact exists, is not a valid explanation for the theory of gravity. Again, we can use the scepticism from right to suggest that dark energy is not relevant to the mechanics of gravity. So this is actually quite a persuasive possibility, and I'll leave it in yellow. We've then got C. Is not a disprovable concept or theory. Well, we're told, just after the line about dark energy, that flat earthers fill the gap in their knowledge with something no one can disprove, suggesting that dark energy, as a concept, cannot be disproven. Not only does the author tell us this, but as conspiracy theorists believe that something which is not disproven must be real, and they believe in dark energy, the conclusion must be that dark energy is not a disprovable theory. So this too is a definite possibility. D says, must be real. Well, the author tells us again that flat earthers and conspiracy theorists in general believe that that which cannot be disproven must be real, and they say that again just here in the second paragraph. However, the author themselves is very much against this flawed conception of proven reality. In fact, they label it as bizarre. Therefore, this is not what is suggested by the author, and D cannot be right. The author prefers to leave us with the view that dark energy cannot be disproven, so again, it may be proven in future, but it hasn't been yet. So that dispels both the answers that it cannot exist, but simultaneously that it must be real. And finally, E is an unexplainable concept. Well, the author suggests that dark energy is not disprovable, as we saw, but as it cannot be disproved, there is the possibility that it might be proved in future. Therefore, the author is not insinuating that it is or will remain an unexplainable phenomenon. Aside from that, there's no further mention of how or why dark energy works or an explanation of its mechanics. This then is almost certainly wrong. We are left having to choose between B and C, and it's quite tricky. It ultimately boils down to which answer can we be more certain of. Well, we can be certain that the author's view is that dark energy cannot be disproven, for the reasons we talked about, and the line, they fill the gap in their knowledge with something which no one can disprove. Can we be equally certain of B? Well, how can we know that something which has not been disproven is irrelevant to gravity? It may be that, if proven, dark energy turns out, however improbable, to go some way to explaining the mechanics behind gravity. After all, gravity itself is only a theory anyway. So, although this is a tricky question, I think we can be more confident that C is the right answer. And the last question in our little sample text is, which of these words or phrases was used sarcastically? Now, understanding complexities and subtleties of language will be covered more expansively in Lecture 5, Understanding Nuances. But we should be able to tackle this particular question quite easily. We're looking for a word or phrase that does not simply take its literal meaning, but reveals something deeper about the author's view, namely that they don't really mean what they've said. I might say, "Well done," to congratulate you for having achieved something. Or I might sarcastically say, "Oh, well done," after you trip and fall over. What I really mean is, "You fool." So the first answer then is A, so-called. This could indeed be the answer we're looking for. The author uses this phrase just here, where they say so-called flat earthers, as if to say that this group of people that label themselves as flat earthers do so for the wrong reasons. Maybe they're foolish, something along those lines. So, it's a possibility. Then there's B, overstep the mark. Now, this term is used in the second paragraph to, I think, express, unironically, the author's view that flat earthers have gone too far in their conspiracy. It seems to be intended to be read at face value, with no double entendres or anything like that. So this can't be right. And in fact, the same goes for C, permeates every facet. Equally, this is used to convey, albeit quite grandiously and poetically, its literal meaning, that mistrust is becoming present in every aspect of public lives. The author doesn't intend that we read in any hidden or opposite meanings. The next possibility then is D, right. Now, we've already touched on this word in the last question, and it certainly does seem like it's used sarcastically. The author begins by setting out a highly improbable theory on dark energy, which is described as bizarre. And having explained it, the author says, right, as if to say, really, or you can't be serious. Essentially, they don't quite mean what they say to be taken seriously. So this is probably what we're looking for. So our final answer possibility is E, open the valves. Now this is used quite unsarcastically as a metaphor for allowing something through as if it were a valve, in this case allowing through an excess of mistrust. So what's the answer? Well, having had the benefit of reading possibility D, right, we're pretty sure that that is the correct answer, and for that reason we can discount A, so-called.
And with that, we get to the end of the sample text. I hope you've learned something valuable there and see the sort of skills that we're going to be developing over the course.